Good morning. Good morning. My name is Delphine Rankin, and I am the Chief Executive Officer for SOS Children's Villages, Illinois. I welcome everyone to our Women in Leadership conversation series. This series that you're about to be a part of entails a conversation and journey of 5 women who have lived their life in different spaces, but have chosen at some parts of their career to be a part of the entrepreneurial world. I want to engage you in this dialogue and conversation with these women. Please take some time to fill up your tank with some professional development opportunities. Enter any questions that you may have in the chat, and we will make sure that we entertain those throughout this conversation series. Again, we welcome you to the Women in Leadership Conference. And with that, I am going to turn you over to our I'm going to turn you over to our Deputy Director, Lori Daugherty, who also will serve as your moderator for today. Lori?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Lori Daugherty. I'm the Deputy Director of SOS Children and Villages, and I welcome you to our 3rd annual Women in Leadership Forum. I have the honor today of moderating our Women in Leadership and Entrepreneur series. I'm honored, and I am really excited to be in this space with such strong, dedicated women. And I encourage our audience to please enter any chats or enter any questions into our chats. We want to encourage audience participation. And this is really an opportunity to engage with women who've been in leadership position and get any advice or offer any additional support. And we really encourage that. Without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panelists. First, we have Brooke Foley, who is the CEO of Jane Agency. She specializes in strategic planning, storytelling, and sustainable brand platforms, and serves diverse business and Fortune 100 companies.
Hi, I'm Brooke Foley, and I started my career out in major agencies, focusing on brand and consumer branding, business branding. Eventually, when I started my own company, I started to really learn the trials and tributes of what it meant to be a business owner and what it meant to be a women business owner. And there's a big difference. So over time, I dedicated the company's main capabilities and services towards helping entrepreneurial spirited women make their way through the diverse supply chain. And that's where we specialize today. So I'm very excited and honored to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brooke. Next on our panelist board, we have Stephanie Hart, and she's the owner of Brown Sugar Bakery. This company is famous for their Southern cakes with recipes of love and memories from her grandmother. Ms. Stephanie believes strongly about building community and sharing our culture with the rest of the world. Stephanie, we're happy to have you.
Good morning and thank you. I am very, very happy to be here and to discuss entrepreneurship and help in any way that I can. I am a serial entrepreneur. I started out in 1984 with a technology company, kept that company for 20 years and moved into not sure why I made that transition, but I have, and what I'm doing. I love working in this space, and I love working in my community.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next, we have Ms. Sasha. Ms. Sasha Ivy has over 15 years experience in construction and real estate. She has the largest female minority construction company in the Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana. Thank you, Sasha, for joining us.
Good afternoon, ladies. I am so proud and honored to be here with you guys. I started in construction back in 1995, real estate and construction. And growing up in Inglewood, I saw so much disparity And most of the times when I was sitting in community meetings, all I saw was a group of men. And I thought to myself, women can do this too. We are bright, we're smart, we're energetic, we're intelligent, and there's nothing that a woman can't do. So I thought about 15 years ago about being a lady GC, and I had so much going on in the real estate space that I didn't move forward with that vision. And so just about 4 years ago, once again, I was in a community meeting with all men, and I said, I'm going to become a lady GC, and I'm going to be the largest female minority construction company. And that's what brought about Pink Heart Has Construction. We love to train women. We want to bring more women in the construction space. So I thank you guys for having me, and I'm looking forward to this dynamic panel of women.
Thank you so much for sharing. We're really happy to have you. And next we have Ms. Britt Julius. She is a writer, editor, and essayist of the publications like the New York Times, Vogue, Esquire, and currently serves as a music critic for the Chicago Tribune. Ms. Julius, we're happy to have you.
Thank you. I am very excited to be here. My experience is a little bit different, a little bit unique than some of the other panelists in that my career originally began in the blogging world and sort of straightforward journalism world. And as I kind of continued, I branded myself through my blog and created an LLC off of that to expand the types of writing that I do, not just journalism, but also social media, different forms of content creation, copywriting, as well as things like this. So work on panels, working with different brands and organizations, particularly sort of focused within my niches of arts and culture. So it's a little bit about me, and yes, very excited to be here and discuss more about this.
Wonderful, thank you. And for our final panelist, we have Ms. Clarita Santos. She serves as the Executive Director in Civic Partnerships for Healthcare Services Corporation. She's a founding member of the Center for Asian Health Equity and currently a chair of the Executive Advisory Board of the University of Illinois Chicago School of Public Health. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to hearing you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. It's really such an honor to be here. A little bit about me. So I'm actually first generation Filipino American. My family got here through the Navy. My dad joined the Navy in the Philippines. We moved around quite a lot, and eventually also have roots in the West Coast in California, in Charleston, South Carolina, and Chicago is my chosen home. My background is actually in public health, and I've used some of that entrepreneurial spirit in creating the Center for Asian Health Equity at the University of Chicago, and I apply that work that I do now at Healthcare Service Corporation, as Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, in the work that I do around health equity and health disparity. So I'm very privileged to be here and to learn from all of you all as audience members as well as the panelists. So thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the introductions of our panelists. And as you can see, we have a powerhouse with us today, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So to get us started, I pose the question, how do you define entrepreneurship? And what exactly do you mean when we talk about entrepreneurial spaces? I'll start this question off with Ms. Brooke. What are your thoughts?
Sorry, I couldn't get the camera to go back on. I think the entrepreneurial space is one where I don't know that everybody always realizes they're getting into it. I didn't. And I don't think people talk about that very much. It sort of happens at you. And you make decisions and you reach for things, and you have confidences and you have insecurities, and you start moving through those things, and all of a sudden you start creating something that is saleable, and being able to manage that is actually the entrepreneurial role. And so I have been continually humbled even this week, continually humbled by what it means to be in the entrepreneurial space. I don't know, it's something that you always realize you're stepping into. It doesn't have great boundaries. It's one of those things where inherently as women, we don't necessarily have all the tools to manage and control it, but we're visceral and we're passionate and we do things that we believe in, and we end up in a space. And then it's like, well, the tools to do something with that isn't what we were taught on the playground or when we were younger and as we're growing up. And so it's like rules, boundaries, courage, all those things that go into it. And you find yourself sort of like, are you the wizard? Are you like, do you know? Did you figure this out? Do you have the answer? I don't know. I'm the wait, I'm and I think that's kind of like what I feel like the entrepreneurial space is. And it's exciting, it's wonderful, it's scary. And it doesn't get talked about like that.
Thank you so much for that. I agree. It could be a scary space. And I'm not an entrepreneur, but I, often thinking about it, you're in charge of your own destiny, and that's heavy. So, I commend you. Absolutely. Ms. Stephanie, how about you? How do you feel about entrepreneur spaces, and how would you define entrepreneurship?
For me, my experience has been as a child, I never really wanted to have a job. I didn't feel like for certain reasons that I'd be qualified for a job. The jobs that I wanted, I love to sell. And that's really passion is selling. It's not necessarily any particular business. I like sales and building. And so I never really. So I was very intentional about being an entrepreneur. I will say that does come along with a lot of things that you may not realize. And also, I would like to encourage that you said you can speak about entrepreneurship, because there's another thing that I really do like to talk about, and that's entrepreneurship. To some extent, whatever you have the entrepreneurial mindset, you're an entrepreneur. You're just doing it internally versus out here. So yeah, I've just always wanted to do work for myself. It was just never get a job.
Thank you so much. Ms. Sasha, how about you?
For me, it was a little bit different. I was thrown into entrepreneurship about 16 years ago when I worked for a corporate company. And I was forced to come back to work at 9 months pregnant and went into labor at my desk. And there I kept contemplating, because I was in real estate part-time. But sometimes if you have a vision and a goal, people will talk you out of it. They'll say, oh, no, you can't go fully into entrepreneurship. You have 3 kids. What about your benefits? But sometimes God has a bigger plan for you. And for me, he had to step in and say, this is what I have for you. So I was forced into entrepreneurship, and I've been in it over 16 years, and I just haven't looked back. It's not easy. I will tell you, you're going to have your ups and downs, but if you're passionate about something, it won't stop you. It's not about the money. For like construction, for me, it's about the passion that I see that the community really needs me. So I'll say entrepreneurship is just having a passion and a goal and not letting anything stop you. And know that it's going to be, because I think working a job is easier than entrepreneurship. Reason being, you know what time that you're going to work, your hours, your paycheck, either you have a weekly paycheck. But for entrepreneurs, we have to get out there and work hard every day and to get to that next space of knowing, you may like for me in construction, I may get a large draw, and then for weeks, you may not have a draw coming. So you have to manage your time, your space. I'm a single mom. So entrepreneurship is not easy, but it's worth it.
Thank you so much for sharing. I pose the same question to Ms. Britt.
For me and my field in particular, I think entrepreneurship is, I think it's like 3 A's, right? So like action, agency, and autonomy. Journalism, writing in general is a very tricky field to be in, especially now. Lots of publications are closing. They don't know how to fund themselves in a sort of changing advertising world. And so sort of relying or sort of being subject to the whims of what's happening at different publications and organizations can be really difficult, and it can leave you sort of left out to dry. So for me, I kind of realized from a very early age, like even before I started working, one of my college internships was with the Chicago Tribune when I was 20 years old, and I was working for the Tribune. Used to have a magazine called Trib, and the entire staff minus one person got laid off, right? And 2 interns. And so that really told me, it's like, oh, okay, like, it's like you haven't even graduated college yet, and this is what you can, potentially expect going into the, writing world. So the farther along that I got and the more I sort of became intentional in terms of what I wanted for my career and my goals and what I wanted to do and where I wanted to write and things like that, I realized that I really needed a lot more agency and autonomy over my career. And so that's why it was really important for me to sort of establish myself as this sort of multifaceted, writer and creator, and then be able to sort of market and promote my skills. It allows me to not be subject to what's happening with one particular place, not feel like I am drowning, really diversify my skills, and in the end, have control and not feel like that everything is sort of wrong or not going well for me. I see and talk to my peers, and they say very similar things, right? Where they're just sort of like, I don't know what to do, or I'm drowning, or this is really hard, et cetera. But I have been sort of slowly working on this since I was 22 years old. And so now I can be at a place, in my mid 30s where I'm like, okay, I'm going to accept these types of pieces rather than these types of pieces. I don't have to grind as much as I did before. I can be much more intentional and just healthier in general for myself. So yeah, action, agency, autonomy for me.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. And Ms. Clarita, I pose the same question to you.
Yeah, I would say I would define entrepreneurship in 2 ways. One, that it meets a practical need. And number 2, that it's a way of making the world a better place. So my early experiences with entrepreneurship was actually through my mom. So when we were living in Texas, at that time my dad was stationed there. My mom, I never thought about entrepreneurship until actually during this panel discussion. And what she did was she decided, she's a very good cook. So she started catering, but not the, catering as we think about it, but she would make, sausages and egg rolls or lumpia and sell it to our neighbors as a way of making income. Because at that time she didn't have a job, she had us, and that was a way. So my first experience, so I remember stuffing those sausages, right, helping her out. I was like in 4th grade. So my early experiences with entrepreneurship is this sense of agency and doing something because of a practical need. And for that, it was really around how do you make sure as a family we survive and thrive. Now, who I am today, I see entrepreneurship as a way of creating something to make the world a better place. And one of the things I want to talk about is our Blue Door Neighborhood Center. Through Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, we created a center to address health and wellness in the neighborhoods where we live. So we have a Blue Door Neighborhood Center in Pullman, Morgan Park, and South Lawndale. So to me, as part of that entrepreneurial spirit, it was really creating something we hadn't done before, creating the vision for that, and then understanding, working with communities, what the needs are within communities and being very respectful, right? So I think at the end of entrepreneurship, it's meeting a need that people need and making sure you address that in a way that's respectful. So that's how I define entrepreneurship. It's a way of meeting a practical need and also as a way of making the world a better place.
Thank you so much. And those Blue Door places are very, very nice.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so we have a question from the audience, and I think it's worth mentioning. A lot of our audience members would like to know what's the best way to get started if they're looking to start their entrepreneur journey, and then what type of support system would you recommend going along with that journey? Ms. Cleary, I'll go ahead and start with you.
I think I wanted to echo a lot with what the panels have said here. I think part of it is having a vision and understand what it is that drives you. So for me, being first generation Filipino American, health equity has always something that's driven me. So it's really around justice and fairness. And I share a story when my dad was I believe he was in his 60s, and he had a heart attack. And I was noticing a lot of Filipino American males were having a lot of heart attacks, right? But when we'd go into the doctor's offices or in the hospitals asking about what's going on in the Filipino community, can you give me some information in a language my dad can relate to and can understand? There was no information. So at that early age, I was thinking about, wait a minute, how do we make sure that all communities' health are recognized, particularly people of color, right? And our health needs are recognized, because at that time, the only information that was there was English. There were no images of Filipinos, showing that could have heart disease. So I think for me, it's really understanding what it is that drives you and then creating a vision around that. And so that's how I ended up being one of the founding members of the Center for Asian Health Equity in the University of Chicago, is because of that early experiences. And when I came to Chicago, and Chicago is such a blessing, right? Because we have such diverse communities, we have the ability to really understand and explore issues that are important to you. And so that's what's really good, what drives me, is having that vision and passion for what drives you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Sasha, how about you? How would you describe or give advice for the best way to get started, and what type of support system would you recommend during that journey?
I think the best way to get started is have, like Ms. Clarita said, have a dream and a vision and a goal. A dream is only a dream until you write it down, make a plan, and make it become a reality. So if you have a dream, and you have to be passionate, and I spent nights after nights, 3 o'clock in the morning, to create the logo, the brand. You just have to be tough enough to say nothing is going to stop me. So once you get started, do a lot of research, take classes, know what you really want, and go after it. And I'm going to be honest with you, sometimes you don't have a support system. Sometimes you are your support system. And so with that being said, sometimes it was times where my family didn't understand where I was going with pink hard hats and the long hours. And sometimes you're working even after work. So I would just say, as far as the support system, you may not always have a support system. You may have to be your own support system and your own cheerleader sometimes. And sometimes it's rough, but don't let anything stop you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Brooke, how about you?
When you talk about support systems, I think the support system for me stems out from my children, my family, and then out into my team, and then into my clients. And you can see the consistency in terms of character. And as an entrepreneur, I think you have to protect all of those. Like, you have to protect your business from your family, you have to protect your family from your business. But then you start to think about, okay, well, what types of clients create an environment that allow me to hire the type of people that I like, that when I need something back from the business, I can go take care of my children. Like, there's a reality for that as women. Men don't have to think that way at all. It's not part of their hierarchy or their structure of thinking. And so, you think about, like, it took a long time for me to understand how to screen out clients that were harmful. they were some of the most lucrative people that I'd ever, thought about doing business with. And some of them were even like major government contracts, but the toxicity created an environment where the team that I had to hire to manage those people were not healthy for me to be able to be true to myself, to the things that I love doing, which made it hard for me to be happy and focused and be able to see what was right and wrong happening in my home at my own kitchen table. So when they say things about, women start businesses, cottage businesses, they start from your kitchen, they start at your kitchen table. They start at your bedside table. When the light goes on at 2 a.m, when you can't think anymore and you pull your laptop on, you're like, I should be asleep because I got to get lunches made at 7 a.m. But that is when you think about support structure, I think it starts there. And then if you think about, there are personal support structures, there's professional support structures, and then there's structures out there meant to help us. And sometimes they don't know exactly what we need, but if we can find our way to them. So it's things like, like the WBDC or the NMSDC organizations that have business centers that can get us the education that we don't have. And sometimes they tell us to do things and we don't like them. Like, we don't want to do that. I don't want to create a capability statement, or I don't want to go to this conference, or I don't want to leave my kids and do this. And then maybe you shouldn't, but maybe you can find someone on your team that could, right? And so the support structures sometimes push in on us a little bit and it hurts, but we have to learn to say what's right and wrong for us and where are the decisions that we need to make for our business. In the world of starting out, I would say just start doing it. Like, don't train wreck your life over it, but like test it, like for me, I was already employed when a client came to me and said, we want you to start your own business. And I said, I don't want my own business. But then I went through a layoff and I was like, okay, I'm starting my own business, I guess. And so I took on one client and I failed like really bad. But I learned a lot. And then I took on a second one. And so if you make it one step at a time, you find your way. If you think you're going to like come out and, swing a bat and knock it out of the park right away. I mean, some people can, and they do, but there's a foundation of being a strong entrepreneur that builds from like the small baby steps and the fail and fail often and fail fast and fail good. There's a blogger out there. I don't know that he's officially a blogger, but his name's Kenny Friedman. And if you find him on LinkedIn, he talks at length about failing good. And I think that's such an important entrepreneurial conversation. So I believe that it's the small steps that lead to the big wins.
Thank you. I agree. It's the small steps that lead to the big wins because nothing is easy. And you just, well, that's my advice. You just have to keep going.
I'm really good at failing. That's what it comes down to. I'm graceful. I get back up, I pick myself off. Like, you got to just know
failures. These are learning experience, teachable moments.
Totally.
Well, you have to fail or you'll never know what a win is if you never get lost.
Absolutely.
And the wins what you think is a win when you start. I think this is like so important what you just said. The wins that you think when you start are not the wins that you want 10 years out. It changes.
Fair enough, because you're growing. Miss Britt, I pose the same question. What advice do you have for the best way to get started and any support systems or recommendations you have along the way?
I think I would say more than anything, at least speaking from experience from my particular field, is just to do it, which sounds really simple and basic, but based on my own experience, working as an editor, doing freelance editing, getting things pitched to me, talking to potential writers, other people, what I've often found usually, and I don't want this to sound too sexist, but the men will just they don't care. They will have the worst ideas. They'll just throw out pitches. They'll just do whatever they want. Like, I got no experience, but I'm shooting my shot anyway. And, and then I talk to, young women and they're just like, yeah, I want everything to get perfect. And I have these ideas, but I haven't. And I'm just like, girl, you just need to do it. Like, I was like, because based on what I'm seeing here, they're kind of operating oftentimes from this perspective of, if I shoot my shot 100 times, like it's going to make it at least once, right? And so that's something that I really emphasize more than anything. Now, obviously, it's, there's going to be a lot more no's in the beginning. You're going to have to get really comfortable with failure, or even just sort of essentially being ignored, which sometimes can hurt even worse than an outright rejection. But I do think that sort of taking the initial step of just being like, okay, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to be really vulnerable, which I think is really key. That is kind of more important than anything. And that, in some ways it does get easier, but then in other ways it kind of stays the same, and that it's always really hard. And, there's always going to be questions and confusion. You're always going to face some form of failure or rejection. You're not going to necessarily be the first person that's chosen for this opportunity, things like that. So, just allowing yourself that freedom to, experiment, fail, try again, continue to fail. I think that's really sort of key in terms of really getting started in this area in particular. I also think, in a lot of ways, things have become a lot easier. When I first started out, like, I didn't know how to make any connections, especially coming from Chicago, although I had a lot of editorial experience in terms of internships. That wasn't the same thing as having a job. I didn't go to a traditional journalism school. I didn't have all of those particular connections. I had studied actually English literature and philosophy in college. So I was really good at the actual writing part, but not necessarily at sort of making those connections and networking, which really kind of helps you get a lot of those initial jobs. And so really putting myself out there, being vulnerable, allowed for me to get into those doors and spaces that I normally wouldn't have been allowed to be in, whether it was because I didn't know the right people, or because I was Black, or because I was a woman, which is often the case as it relates to the journalism world. And then to speak to that sort of support system aspect, I think it's really crucial and really critical. Especially I think that when I was first kind of starting out and creating my own sort of, business and cultivating my skills, I didn't really have very much of a support system. And I, constantly thought like, this would be a lot easier if I had some people to sort of like shoot ideas off of, or even just to vent towards in some ways as well. So I think cultivating, relationships, however you can get them, is really important and really key. And also, you never really know who you're talking to, if they can sort of help you out farther along the line, if they, are paying attention to what you're doing and things like that. It can be beneficial in that sense, but also, just in general, having that support system that allows you to think and, breathe and digest and figure things out. It just for the health of, or the security of your mental health, I think it's really crucial. So cultivating relationships however you can, and being really intentional and thoughtful about them, I think is really key.
Thank you. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And cultivating relationships is very important. Ms. Stephanie, I like to ask you the same question as well. What's the best way to get started?
I think getting started is getting started, period. You put one foot in the other and you get started. I'm a bootstrap entrepreneur, not a person that was fairly qualified or educated to do either of the businesses that I did. I ran a technology company for 20 years. I am not formally educated. I think that what worked for me, and there may be some specific people in the audience that I'm speaking to, is that I'm self-prepared. I think to be an entrepreneur, you can want to have support systems, but going in, you've got to be very careful about that. Because typically my experience has been whatever it is I want to do new is met with concern. People don't know why you want to do that, or they don't understand what you're doing. And so you can listen to those people or not. I'm very careful. I really filter what people say to me on a daily basis. I think as far as support systems, we've got to learn how to take care of ourselves. And what I mean by that is you got to have habits that work for you. You're not going to make it if you don't. You've got to prepare yourself to get out and do whatever you want to do. I'm not sometimes the most friendly person. I start the morning with serious gratitude, have for years. I constantly listen to positive mental attitude stuff. I'm that person that, started out in the 80s with Zig Ziglar. Now I'm on Esther Hicks and whoever else is speaking something positive. I don't watch television. I don't watch television because really I can't do anything about what's going on. I think that you have to. Also, I think when you do that and you're constantly working, you attract what it is you need. I heard the previous young lady, the music young lady, say that, you never know who you're talking to. And that I would definitely pay attention to, because you don't know who you're talking to, and anybody can offer you some of the best advice. In the 90s, I had a technology company, and there was a gentleman that I walked past every single day that I thought was a bum, right? And I asked somebody else, why do all these people stop and talk to him? And they said, oh, this is an eccentric guy that they're getting stock tips from. And that just reinforced for me that, and actually this guy was not a bum. He was an eccentric guy that actually had a seat on the stock exchange. So that's what I mean. You just don't know. And as women, sometimes we look and we're a little back. Don't do that. Be forward. Let everybody know what you're trying to do. Don't listen to anybody, but let everybody know what you're trying to do, right? Filter through. So yeah, just start and incubate yourself. Read, study, and plan on being the best. And plan on being the best in a huge way. That's the other thing I think we do. We start and we allow ourselves to think really, really small. And I think to get anywhere, you've got to think bigger than what you think you can accomplish, period.
I wanted to kind of comment on what Stephanie, first of all, I was at an event last night and had your delicious caramel cupcakes. So thank you so much. And Zig Ziglar, I can if you think I can. Do you remember that? So yeah. So thank you for that memory.
Yes, absolutely. I love that as well. And you always got to start big. So something that I've heard across all of our panelists, the common theme is experiment, try, fail, make your own blueprint. But how do you overcome imposter syndrome? Can you share any examples or give any advice to our audience? I'll start with Ms. Britt.
I don't know if I'll ever overcome imposter syndrome. I think for me, in some ways, it's almost like a gut check. Anytime that I'm a little too comfortable with a situation, it doesn't necessarily really work out for me in the way that I want it to. I think having a healthy level of doubt or questioning allows me to push myself in a way that I wouldn't do if I was just like, okay, it's the same thing over and over again. Like, it's easy. There's no real problem. But when it gets to a level that it becomes really overwhelming or distracting or forces me to maybe like procrastinate in some ways. The thing that I always remembered that someone, like another writer that I follow, had said on Twitter was that, it's better to just, turn in the worst copy than to turn in nothing at all, right? It reflects much more poorly when you just sort of ignore things, or if you, don't put yourself out there, if you let the opportunities pass you by rather than sort of taking the opportunity or attempting to take the opportunity and failing, right? So you can learn from that experience of failure compared to allowing insecurities or feelings of imposter syndrome to stop you from doing the thing in the first place. And so that's something that I think has been really important for me in terms of sort of getting over the hump of those initial imposter syndrome feelings. I think the other thing that I might say in regards to that as well is that just getting started and doing the thing, once you kind of just get started, I should say, it always becomes easier. Like, even if it's something really challenging, that's at least what I've found. Oftentimes imposter syndrome is, that doubt that you can kind of like get started or do the thing in the first place. But oftentimes just sort of initiating the act kind of reassures you like, oh, actually, I do know what I'm doing. I know what I'm saying. I have the right words. I have the right means. I have the right skills. So being in the actual act of it, for me at least, and just getting started allows me to kind of overcome it. So yeah, I think that's what I would say in terms of trying to overcome imposter syndrome.
Thank you so much. Some very valuable key advice. Ms. Brooke, how would you suggest overcoming imposter syndrome?
I think I've always been plagued by imposter syndrome. I was a tall, thin, blonde child inside of a family that looked very Mediterranean. I didn't fit. And, you know, I was a gymnast that grew 6 inches and couldn't find my legs and hands anymore. Like I just didn't fit. And as I moved into what I wanted to do in college, I wanted to go into computer science, but women didn't go into those programs. I just didn't accept them in the colleges. I didn't fit. And then I ended up in an agency world where I'd grown up as a graphic designer. That's what I went to school for, but I was a graphic designer. I wasn't somebody who went to school for advertising or marketing. I didn't fit. And so I never fit, but I was young and I was female inside of a male dominated technology space. I didn't fit. And I just kept going. I was a force of nature. I just kept not fitting. And then eventually I started being paid and sought after because I didn't fit. And that was weird. And then I realized I was done not fitting and I started my own business. And then I was a creative who owned a business and I didn't fit. I mean, it was just like a constant reinforcement of imposter syndrome. And I touched on it even when I introduced myself or talked about entrepreneurialism, which is, you know, this question of like, are you the wizard? Like, does Sasha have it figured out? Does Stephanie kind of has it locked in, right? But Britt sounds like she's got it. And the truth of the matter is it's that force of nature. And so the point in which you stop allowing that voice of self-doubt, because it's the only voice that matters. There's so many things that people say around us that are harmful, hurtful, distracting, but there are also voices that are encouraging, supportive, and helpful, right? But we choose to hear that one voice that's like, you don't belong here. You don't really fit at this table. And I really never did fit at that table. And I think it becomes, it's motivating and debilitating at the same time. And if you can overcome that voice and you can say to that voice, look, you go bother someone else, like go pick on not me. And it's your own voice. Like, you know, it's a mastery and a practice, I think. And I think anybody who says that they don't have self-doubt is creating a situation where all of a sudden you feel like you have more self-doubt because, well, they don't have it and you do. So I think it's important to understand we all have it. There isn't anyone, no matter how locked in they are and how confident they are, what they do with that voice is what's impressive. Like I was listening to Stephanie talk and I was like, wow, she is so confident. And I've not been that confident as I've rambled through things, but I'm a force of nature. And so I just never heeded any of the distractions. It didn't mean it didn't hurt as I threw myself through those barbed wires. But, you know, I look at that and I say, I want to draw from that strength. Like I want to help from that. So I think part of overcoming imposter syndrome is sitting inside of moments like this, where we can take these voices and share them with the incoming generations, not just female, but male, not just Black, but white and Black, like educate on both sides of everything, not just, you know, short, but tall, all of it. So that as that generation comes into their own, they're more evolved. They can talk openly about imposter syndrome. I don't think I heard the word imposter syndrome until I was 48 years old. You know, at that point, I was done being the imposter. I was the impossible at that point, right? I redefined myself. So, you know, I think about like Sasha, that the whole idea of you having to come back at 9 months pregnant. I did the same thing. I was back in the office traveling at 2 weeks after having had a baby. I was called back in 6 weeks after my second child. Like I didn't have a choice. I had to come back. Well, you know what? Being pregnant in a room full of men who aren't pregnant is an imposter syndrome, right? Because I physically can't go out to the bars and drink and negotiate and build relationships and network. And it's about who you know, right? We said that. Yeah, I was back at my hotel room trying to figure out how am I going to like nurse while I'm on the road? you know? So it's the imposter syndrome's all around us, but it's what we use it to force us to overcome. Or, you know, I decided I was going to go after I can't think of it, a brand that supported nursing. I can't think of the brand name right now, but so I turned it into something that I was like, I'm going to overcome this. I'm going to figure out how to turn this into a strength, because you know what? That unmet need that I have right now is so painful that I understand a market and an audience in a way that's like in the moment right now. And I did that, you know, and so it changed the trajectory of where I was headed in terms of purpose-driven work. So I think if you can hear that voice and think about what it's really doing and redirect it and own it, you know, it's a practice.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience. Ms. Stephanie, would you like to share with us how would you overcome imposter syndrome?
I don't look at it as overcoming it. One, I kind of look for that feeling, because then I know I'm getting ready to do something exciting. And to go ahead and do the thing, I work really hard at feeding my head, right? I'm taking all kinds of head to the head every day. And I just fill myself up like with that stuff. It's not easy to do it, but you have to do it. My daughter is also an entrepreneur of sorts. She's an opera singer. She faces the same thing. We kind of go back and forth. She's doing a challenging role now. This morning, we're talking about just, okay, so now you got to think logically and get yourself together. And yeah, sometimes you do have to tell the girl to shut up and remind her, you know, who you are. Like, yeah, and I'm talking about the girl yourself in your head that's, you know, telling you all this garbage. You know, we call them mind monkeys. I have days from, you know, we'll call each other and go, yeah, girl, the monkeys are swinging today. And, you know, she's like, well, I got bullets. Which one what's swinging? And then she'll remind me. So, you know, sometimes you can get other people to remind you, but you definitely have to learn how to talk to yourself about that syndrome, and just don't be afraid of it. Because typically when you hit up against that feeling, you're about to do something more, better. And so it ultimately is a good thing, feel it.
Thank you. I love that. When you are up against that feelings, that means you're about to knock down doors. So I really enjoy that. Ms. Sasha, would you mind sharing how you feel about overcoming imposter syndrome?
I'm sorry, I was trying to get my mic off. I would say I'm probably one of the best examples of overcoming imposter syndrome, because I deal with so much adversity being a woman in construction. But you just, to me, is you don't want to be stuck where you don't want to be. So if you're stuck in a situation and your mind is giving you all this doubt, oh, I can't do it, I'm not prepared for it. And I think about what we call poor mentality is passing over opportunities regularly. So that means you're passing over opportunities because your mind is telling you, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not prepared enough. Like Brooke said, it was so many things that her mind was saying, you don't fit, you know? And so you have to get over in your mind that you can't do it, or you're not good enough, or I'm a Black female minority in a construction space. You know, I could have said, hey, I can't go up against all these guys because they come at me. They be throwing the daggers all the time, you know, and you just have to fight back. And I always say, I'm here today to put my She Hero cape on, and I'm going to do something in construction today to make the community better. And that's just how I look at it.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Clarita, what are your feelings or thoughts on overcoming imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I really relate to what both Stephanie and Britt were saying, and I think it's really around, to me, it is managing it. And I guess there's a couple of ways. One is I do still have that, sometimes when I am doing, can I do this? And I go back to, okay, it's overcoming that self-doubt. So for me, it's around, okay, show me the evidence, right? So it's me doing an inventory and saying, so what are you good at? You're good at problem solving. So then in my mind, I do, okay, starting from 1980, what have you done, right? And then where you are now, what skills are you going to need in order to do, like, for example, I was asked to be chair of UIC's Executive Advisory Board for School of Public Health. And I'm like, oh my gosh, right? And so I was nervous about it. And what I did was, okay, hold on, Clarita. Okay, what have you done that prepares you for this? And so part of it was, it's an internal thing, right? So as I list off in my head the evidence to show that I've done this and the skills that I need to do this job, I've done it before, that gives me confidence. I'm like, okay, and then I do it. The second thing that I do is I network. So I knew before Suzette was a former chair of the EAB. So this is part of the support structure. When you talk with your friends and you talk to somebody who's done the position before, that gives you confidence because you're talking to someone who knows you know yourself, and it just reinforces that, right? So it's both an internal work, right? You got to do the internal work and say, wait a minute, I got this. But it's also that external work where you reach out to your network, whether that's Suzette, who did the position before, to my friends who I trust and talk about what I'm looking to do. So that's how I overcome imposter syndrome, is, showing myself the evidence that I can do this, and then reaching out to others who I can brainstorm with.
Thank you so much. That was a lot of valuable advice. Thank you. So throughout this journey, we have discussed getting started. We've discussed how overcoming personal self-doubt and ways that we can work through that. We have a question from the audience, and they like to discuss finances. So how do you finance your business, especially in the initial startup phase, including how do you find funders? How do you find clients? How do you decide what to charge for your services? I like to start this question off with Ms. Britt.
So I originally began sort of like freelance writing and creating my LLC when I had a full-time job. That was what was, sort of most important for me. I had to pay rent and eat. And so I couldn't just sort of go in blind, and there is no sort of startup funding or costs when it comes to freelance writing, and maybe the startup costs and funding were just the ones that I had for myself that I could then sort of reinvest into what I was doing, and essentially sort of allowing myself the time to pursue projects and opportunities outside of work, after work, on the weekends, things like that. Kind of as it stands now in terms of the cost for things. I live with a chronic illness that affects my lungs. I have had 6 lung collapses. I've had reconstructive lung surgery because I had a hole in my lung and my diaphragm. So that's always in the back of my mind in terms of how I pay for things. It's essentially what do I need to literally live? What do I need to survive, right? I regularly see a pulmonologist. I regularly see an endocrinologist, as well as a functional medicine doctor. And I pay for a lot of medicines and a lot of supplements. And that stuff, it adds up, right? So it's really important for me to really, understand how much do I need for, insurance, and what kind of insurance do I need, right? So, when I would get insurance off of the, open marketplace, I could get the cheapest insurance, possible, but what if something happened to me, right? And it's not able to cover my deductible, right? So I needed to have enough money to spend more on insurance on the front end in case something, would happen to me, which it did happen to me. And so that deductible had already been covered. And so when I ended up being in the hospital for 3 weeks and I had to get lung surgery, my hospital bill was only about $3,000 at the end, right? Instead of, when I saw the initial bill of $90,000, that could have been really bad for me, So just to be, honest and transparent, that's how I always operate off of things, is what does it actually cost for me to be able to survive and thrive, really. I think when I was in my mid to late 20s, it was survive. And then when I got a lot sicker in my early 30s, it became to thrive, right? So have a healthy life, be able to eat what I want, be able to not feel like I'm always in a panic. Or, there was a time when I was, I'd be doing, I'd have like 10, 15 assignments due in a month. I was freelance editing for Vice. I would be hosting events for Pitchfork and the Museum of Contemporary Art and the Chicago Humanities Festival, all within like the same week or so. I'd be doing brand work for Spotify and Bose Audio and all these, like, it was so much stuff. And although it, may have gotten me a lot of money, was it really practical? For other elements of my life? No, it wasn't. So now I really consider both, again, like what helps me thrive, what also allows me to not overwork myself, to burn myself out, what allows me to continue pursuing and doing things that are actually sort of beneficial and help my career. And, instead of just doing things that are like quick money, quick cash, et cetera. Because then, slowing down and really focusing on the projects that mean a lot to me, and sort of figuring out how I needed to pivot to allow myself to get those bigger deals and bigger opportunities, then allowed me to do less projects and get, more money. And so, speaking on like a frank standpoint, I did some writing work for Waze, like the navigation app that was sort of like music related, and it was quick, and it was interesting, and it was different, and it paid a good like $20,000, right? And so things like that were really important for me to, instead of just before I would do like, okay, I'm going to pick up like 5 album reviews, I'm going to pick up these 10 things, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, like. Yeah. So as I've kind of grown and gotten older, I've really sort of determined and made decisions based on costs and things like that, based on sort of my health is a driving factor. That's what I'll just say. So.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, and that valuable advice is really helpful for our audience. Ms. Clarita, would you like to share on any background regarding finances or how to look for clients and that?
Lori, do you mind if I defer to the panelists? I think they probably have more experience, just because mine is a little bit different working for a company, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ms. Sasha, would you like to answer?
So for me, the first thing I would suggest, if you don't have a lot of money, you can start your LLC, S Corp. You can go on and see how much it costs to start. Your EIN is free. And then I would suggest go and get you a business bank account. Those will be the first 3 things if you don't have a lot of money to start your business. And then as far as construction is different. So every project that I do is different. So pricing, it just depends on, it's just depends on if you're doing a kitchen and bath, depending on what the clients want. Some clients want mid-grade material, some clients want high-end material. So it just all depends. And then the labor that goes into it. But I would say you can start small, and then also credit is important. Build your personal credit and your business credit, then you can get funding. A lot of funders want you to have a 680 credit score. So I would say work on that as well, because then you can start getting your credit cards and you can get business funding. And for someone just starting out, to me, that would be the best way to go. That's the way I went. I started out with just small steps. Taking small steps, investing into your business. You may get your income tax instead of spending on things that's frivolous. I always believe I invest in things that bring me money back. Give you an example. For my birthday last year, I was like, oh, I'm just going to go get a car. But then I thought about it. Instead of a car, I'm going to go get an F-150 because that's going to bring me money back into my business. You know, I have cars, you know, sometimes you do the impromptu and I do it too. As ladies, we see something, we don't even need it, but we just want to buy it. You know, we want to do something nice for ourselves. But you always want to think of ROI, return on investment. What are you putting out there that can bring you a return on your investment back? So when these guys see me driving up in the F-150 and they're like, oh, she's little, she's driving that big truck. Well, that's an investment because I can haul tools, wood, whatever to the work sites if I need to. So I would just say, think about a return on your investment, and you can start your business small and always work your way up. For me, as far as clients, because I've been in real estate and construction for so many years, once I put it out there, it wasn't as hard because I had been taught about construction. I had been doing flips. I had been doing that. So it wasn't something that I was just jumping into. And as far as construction, take you some classes. We offer free training for women that want to get into construction. And we also pay as you're going through the classes. So the ladies can reach out to me, but you need to learn because it's so many moving parts in construction. Anything that you do, I think you need to research and learn and be familiar with it and not just, you know, jump out there, you know, take you some classes. So that's what I was.
Thank you so much for sharing. Ms. Stephanie, do you have any thoughts on finance and advice for the audience?
So first, I would say if you're starting a business, know what kind of business you want to start. I didn't get as many kinds of experiences when I was in technology working with people that want to start a business as I've had since I've started the bakery. I think that's, quote, a more accessible business to people. So I get asked a lot about starting. You are to those people come to me, how much money do you want to make? To my music ladies, again, or how are you going to take care of yourself? So first you need to know that. What is it you're trying to do? And then second, I would definitely say around financing, thank you, Sasha. We got to talk about it. Get your credit together, because if you're not going to get any money without good credit. And good credit is something that is so easily sacrificed in a business. Me personally, I started my business with my money and with my credit. I don't necessarily think that's the smartest thing to do. I paid for it. It's what I felt I had to do at that time. And so because of that, you know, I opened my doors on the same day that I had my grand opening at Brown Sugar Bakery. My car was being repossessed out of the back. So, you know, there's that balance, right? Clients, I would definitely say getting clients and finance both, you've got to educate yourself about. I was recently very much challenged working with a large consulting firm regarding my scaling. And they gave me a book that I was definitely angry about receiving. It was a book about finance, and it started with a lemonade stand, and the cover of it had a lemonade stand on it. And I thought, oh, this is what they think about me. And I forced myself to read that book. And I've read other books on finance, but literally actually reading this rudimentary book about financing that started with a lemonade stand, it helped. And I was embarrassed that I was given the book. And sometimes you'll learn through embarrassing situations, but you have to educate yourself. And if you don't know, you can't be ashamed. You don't know. You got to educate yourself. And if you got to start at A, right? Clients, every day they're clients. Retail business, you've got to learn how to attract people, and you also have to learn how to take people and their personalities. When you start out, one of the folks made a great thing. I don't do all business anymore, but when I started out, I did everything. If you wanted me to put less sugar in the peach cobbler, that was fine. Now I don't think anybody would ask me about changing a recipe. So you have to be able to find clients, and you've got to be a little bit open to, if it's a little bit further than what I do. Folks don't know this. I started out my first year, I cook as well as bake. And I made Thanksgiving dinner. People still 20 years later ask me about that. I'm not making your greens or your sweet potato anymore, honey, sorry. But I did it to make ends meet, right? So clients are, what you need for now. Be open, be flexible about attracting them. And then finance, I put myself into my business, and I got my first formal finance literally 2 years ago. I've been in this business for 21 years. So rob Peter, pay Paul, know how to put Peter in the hospital, revive his butt. You've got to get creative sometimes.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Brooke, I'll ask you the same question.
I find this question to be one of the most forced personal growth out of all of them. The notion of financing and everything around it terrifies me. I have a disability, which I learned about later in life, called dyscalculia, which means that I don't understand numeric concepts the same way you might. And it transcends into everything. My kids grew up with me saying to them, put on the other sock. No, the other sock, and eventually they'd get the right sock, but it has to do with left, right, spatial relationships, everything. And so when I moved into owning my own business, the space of financing was frightening for me, like physically terrifying. And I think a lot of people have that. We don't come into entrepreneurship educated on what finance means. It's a big, scary word, and numbers and math. And here I was an executive for 25 years, and I went to open my own company, and I sat down at the bank that held my mortgage and my home equity line. And I was a single mother, and I went to open a bank account, and they would not give me a credit card because the likelihood of me paying back a credit card as a single woman was not likely. It wasn't even about my credit. My credit was excellent. And I had to pay the bank $1,500 to get a $1,500 credit card so that I could create some of the processes and platforms that I needed to start my business. And then when I used the $1,500, I had to pay it back. And after 3 months, they raised my credit line to $2,500. And then I raised it to $5,000. That was my beginning in financing. I was financing myself. And people would drop their jaw. They were like, what? That's crazy. What year was that? And I was like, that was 2009. That was not that long ago. Right? I mean, I was paying a mortgage that was substantial. I had been paying that mortgage for 15, 17 years. I was credible. I'd been employed since I was 18. But because I was a single mother, it wasn't likely that my business would be able to pay back $1,500. So I think that what I didn't understand at that time was credit, how to use it. I didn't understand the word leverage, and I didn't understand financial instruments. I finally got a line of credit after 5 years of being in business. I got a $20,000 rotating line of credit, and I felt really proud about that. Meanwhile, a guy who started a business 2 years earlier than me, who didn't have any of the client base that I had, didn't have any of the government contracts that I had, got a $150,000 rotating line of credit 2 months after starting his business. And I was excited about my 20 grand. But it was a rotating line of credit. Now, here's the thing that I didn't also understand. And this is why I would say the most important thing about financing is getting educated on what you need. Like, what's your nut? What do you really need? And what do you not need? So I really didn't need a line of credit, actually. I just had a bunch of people telling me I did. So I put a lot of energy and effort into getting it, but I didn't really need it because I was actually financing myself from the start. And when I say I was financing myself, like if you put $10 into your business, make sure you get $12 out. Now you have $10 to put back into your business and you have $2 to live on, right? It's a simple concept, but no one says that to us that simply. And so eventually I got in a situation where a major bank wanted all of our business. They wanted to aggregate all of our assets and all of our media dollars and everything. And it was substantial. And they were like, oh, we'll get you that $150,000 line of credit. And I was like, well, I don't really need it. And they flipped a rotating line of credit into an SBA loan. And so as an entrepreneur, know what you're getting into. It's actually predatory debt. And what happens is when we don't know what that is, it changes the way we're able to operate. It changes how we're able to put food on our table. It changes how we're able to do things. I think, Britt, you said you were driven by your health. I was driven by being able to feed my children, right? I could starve, but I needed to feed them. And I knew that. And I had never wanted to own my own business, but now here I was, I had this rotating line of credit. The bank is encouraging me to use it. They're saying, you got to use it, or we're going to pull it. I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to have a line of credit pulled on me. I didn't understand what that meant. So I used it. And then 5 months later, they pulled the whole line of credit and turned it into a loan. I was like, what? So it's a really, really important from an entrepreneurial standpoint that you get educated on financing. So I think it was Stephanie or Sasha who said, get educated, like take classes, absolutely take classes. There's different bureaus and different organizations that can teach you things. And today I speak often on women in predatory debt. And I speak often on what it means to self-finance, because you don't need a lot. You just need to know what you need, right? So if you only need $10, only take $10. If you have $10 that you can invest, make sure you get $12 back. They're basic principles. And if I with dyscalculia can understand that, it's just conceptually understanding that. And when you do that, you take away the big scary monster of what financing is. And if you aren't scared of financing, then you've got it. You're like, good. You just know what your monthly nut is, know what you need to cover it. As long as you make $1 more, then you're going to continue to be profitable. You could be able to grow. It's more than $1. But anyway, but I think that the financing part's a really big part of being an entrepreneur. So, you know, if you go back to that lemonade stand that Stephanie mentioned, the basic principle is sitting right there. And I'd love that book. I'd love it if you would throw it in the chat or whatever. And I would love to read it, because the more and more we can break financing down for entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, for women in ascending careers, break it down so that the reality behind finance itself is tangible and no different than, do I want pink lipstick or red lipstick? Like, make it that accessible to us. The more empowering we can make the emerging entrepreneurs coming behind us.
Hi, Lori, can I jump in for a second?
Oh, sure.
So for 6 years, I traveled and I taught finances. I worked with a financial company and I taught credit, debt elimination, estate planning. The one thing when it comes to finances, and Brooke is totally correct, when you're being offered a loan, always think of the rule of 72. And that rule is whatever interest rate, and this is how banks, car dealerships, any type of financial organization makes money off of you. Whatever interest rate you're getting, you divide that by 72, and that's how many years it takes for your money to double. So I'll give you an example. When you go and purchase a car, if they're charging you 18% interest rate, you divide that by 72. If you have bad credit, this is why credit is so important. If you have bad credit, say you go in there with a 580 credit score, they're going to give you 6, and now I've seen some people say 7 years. Well, they've doubled their money on you. If that car is $20,000, in 4 years, they doubled their money to $40,000, but you have 3 more years to pay for this car and it's not worth anything. So I would definitely agree with Brooke. because I taught it for a living. I don't do it anymore because with the construction company, but I did it for 6 years and I traveled the world teaching these classes. So definitely get your credit together, reach out. Some people pay, charge you large cost. It shouldn't take you a large amount of money to get your credit together. Because I'll tell you a quick story. I had excellent credit. I end up having 5 foreclosures on my credit because I did something most people wouldn't do. When it comes to talking about giving someone half or something, you ladies may know what I'm talking about, that they didn't earn. I said, no, I'll let it all go back to foreclosure. Let everything I worked for go back to the bank because I knew about credit. And working with this financial company, my credit went from a 580 to where I couldn't get anything with 5 foreclosures in 6 months. I learned how to repair my own credit working with the company. And it actually didn't cost me anything because that was another entrepreneur. I knew that it was so many people that probably went through what I went through and had bad credit. I said, not only I can get my credit for free, but I can educate myself and then make money traveling, teaching other people. So that's what I did. In 6 months, my credit went from a 580 to a 680. All the foreclosures came off my credit, and then it went up to like 740. And so knowledge is power. Educate yourself, and finances, whatever entrepreneurship company, whatever you decide to do, finances is going to be a part of it. And like Brooke said, she may have not been financially literate, but she knew once they turned that loan into, once they turned what was a line of credit. And I'll say, Brooke, another reason that they wasn't financing you in 2009 is because the market crashed. Banks was not financing anyone in 2009. I shut my real estate office down in 2009. But I just want to say, definitely educate yourself, read books, whatever you can do to educate yourself on finances.
Sasha, you're such a badass.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you to all of our panelists. I can personally say I have been overwhelmed by the amount of advice and really the spirit of each of you. And I will be pondering on this for the rest of the day. I definitely want to invite all of our panelists to give their closing remarks and any last thoughts that you would like to share with myself and the audience as we get closer to our wrap-up time. And Brooke, since you're on the screen, would you like to share any closing thoughts or advice for us?
So it's the voices you're hearing today that help create the answers that you need for tomorrow, but it's also the voice in your own head. But I would definitely, reach out to Sasha, Britt, Stephanie, Clarita, myself. I'm speaking for everybody, but I'll tell you, for me, find me on LinkedIn. I am dedicated towards sharing the journey, making it easier for those behind me so that they could do more and go farther and go faster. But it's making sure that you have conversation around you all the time, because none of this stuff's intuitive. It's stuff we have to teach each other.
Absolutely. Thank you. Stephanie?
I would like to ask, how often do you guys have these classes? Because I loved it, and just connecting with other like-minded women, and that we can help so many women. I know I have a lot of women that reach out to me, text me, email, that I inspire them, and I can't get to, I'm so busy. Like, as soon as we jump off here, I got to get out into the field. So I can't get to all of them, but if maybe, I don't know, this is a thought, maybe we can do this again, maybe in the fall, or, and I would love to go to lunch with you ladies and we can brainstorm, because I just think you all are some powerful women.
Absolutely. I mean, that's definitely something we can discuss once we wrap up. I know I will be interested, but we can see what type of avenues we could take towards that. But would you like to share any closing remarks in regards to our conversation or any advice towards our audience?
So I finally did
Oh.
get unmuted.
Oh, sorry, I hate that.
And I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to answer the question Brooke asked, and that is, who's the wizard? And literally, we all are the wizard. So you got to know that each and every day. Do that mirror work, put your face in, and yes, I'm the wizard. And go out and do it.
I would say just follow your heart, don't let anyone talk you out of your dreams, your vision, your goals, and just go for it.
Thank you. Ms. Clarita?
I would end with the quote that I heard yesterday, and it is that we make our path as we walk it. And so it really speaks to, we all have our own journey, we all have our own passions. And I think we need to compare ourselves to ourselves and always doing that inventory that we can do it, right? We are our wizard. So I love that. Thanks for bringing that up, Brooke. Stephanie, thanks for ending it that way. We are our own wizard, and I think we make our path as we walk it. And that's the advice I'd like to end with.
Thank you. And Ms. Brett, any final closing remarks or advice?
Just do it. Just start, just put yourself out there, just be vulnerable, just be open, just accept failure in order to also receive success. Yeah, I think those are my final thoughts.
Well, thank you all. I really had an amazing time, and I thank you for letting me be your moderator. I think that we've really taken a lot of what you guys have said in, and I know that myself and the audience will be utilizing this advice going forward.
Thanks for having us.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone. I am Kelsey Bulk. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at SOS Children's Villages, Illinois, and I am the chair of our Social Justice Committee, which is who has initiated the Women in Leadership panel series, and this is our 3rd annual series. So thank you all for joining today. Thank you to Delphine for your leadership in making this conversation series a reality and for your opening remarks. Thank you, Lori, for moderating today's panel and for the work you do every day with our foster care agency. And thank you, Brooke, Stephanie, Sasha, Britt, and Clarita for all of your knowledge that you shared today. Clarita, I want to add an additional thank you for the Blue Door community space, which we have utilized several times for meetings and events. It's a wonderful space and a great resource for the community. It's been amazing learning from you all today, and I just wanted to wrap up by sharing some of the highlights and words of wisdom that I noted in today's conversation. So Brooke started us off by talking about how you might not intend to be an entrepreneur, but if you are passionate and you can find yourself with the tools and skills you need to succeed. Stephanie shared that as a child, she never wanted to have a job. She never wanted to work for someone and never felt that she would be qualified to. But that she enjoyed selling and enjoyed building and was intentional about becoming an entrepreneur. She also shared about intrapreneurship, doing the internal work to succeed. Sasha was thrown into entrepreneurship. People may try to talk you out of your vision or your goal, telling you that having a family and responsibilities will prevent you from being able to be a successful entrepreneur. But if you have the passion, take the risks. There's a need in the community, and you can make it work if you don't let anything stop you. Britt spoke about the 3 A's: agency, action, and autonomy. She shared that journalism is a tricky field to be in, particularly now when funding is always in jeopardy. She even witnessed an entire writing staff getting laid off when she was doing a college internship. She realized, seeing that she would need the agency and autonomy over her own career to not be subject to what happens in one particular field or one particular organization. Clarita shared that as a first-generation Filipino American, she witnessed her mother making lumpia and selling food out of a practical need to make sure their family could survive and thrive. She defines entrepreneurship as meeting a practical need in the community and in making the world a better place. Regarding how to get started, she shared a personal story about witnessing her father having a heart attack and seeing a more and more prevalent issue in the Filipino community regarding heart health. She saw this need for better health information for specific communities, and having that initial vision is what drove her to move forward in this field. Regarding support systems, Sasha agreed with Clarita on the importance of having a dream, vision, and goal, and the passion to make it happen. She encourages us to do the research, go to classes, go after what we want, and that not everybody has a support system, but don't let that stop you. Brooke's support system consists of her kids, family, work, and clients. She also shared that sometimes you have to protect your family from your work and vice versa, and that this is a consideration that men don't face in the workforce, that she had to actually cut ties with some lucrative clients because it was a toxic environment for herself and for her team. She agreed with Sasha's advice on seeking out trainings and additional educational resources and told us to fail good, that our goals can change as we grow. Britt shared that in the creative field, her advice is to just do it. She shared that men don't really have the same issues with voicing their ideas and opinions that many females do, that we are often very cautious about wanting everything to be perfect and to not wasting our one shot. But she shared that shooting 100 times, we're more likely to get that one shot and have that success. Stephanie was a bootstrap entrepreneur and said she wasn't formally educated to run either of the businesses that she ran, but she is self-prepared. That again, you don't have to have the support systems, you can create your own, and to not feel like you have to rely on someone outside to make it happen. Regarding imposter syndrome, this is something apparently all of us face. Britt shared that she may never overcome her imposter syndrome, and having a healthy level of self-doubt pushes her forward. Brooke shared that she's felt imposter syndrome since she was a child, even within her own family, and that being a young female in a male-dominated tech space, being a pregnant woman in a room full of men, she felt imposter syndrome throughout, and she had to navigate situations that men never will have to, such as finding out where she can nurse while on business trips. She just continued to not fit in, eventually accepted it, redirected it, and owned it. Stephanie spoke of shutting down your inner girl with the negative thoughts, which she called her mind monkey. And Sasha, being a woman in construction, shared that having dealt with more than her fair share of adversity, you can't let a poor mentality hold you back. Don't let you pass up opportunities that would be good for you in the future. Regarding finances, Britt shared that she plans her finances based on what she needs personally, and you have to weigh how much you're working against a healthy work-life balance so that you can not only survive, but thrive. Sasha shared that getting a business bank account and a line of credit and having a 680 or higher credit score will help you get other funding. Stephanie shared how she personally financed her business to get started and had to be flexible and customizable with her clients. But once she established her client base, she no longer had to be so accommodating, that you could set your business up to succeed. There was a lot of great advice shared, including about whether you need to take out a line of credit or not, as Brooke shared, and all the panelists shared about taking risks, taking things one step at a time, and following their passions. There were a lot more questions that came in. If we had longer today, I'm sure we could have stayed and talked for hours. So thank you all for your words of wisdom. Thank you to the audience for joining today. We do have another panel discussion next week, also on Wednesday at 10 a.m., also virtually. And that panel is on women in health and nonprofit. We hope to see you all there. Thank you again and have a great day.